Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Chris Macpherson Show, your black and white home of sporting opinion. No grey views here. We're pumped to have you back on board, and we're very excited for a sweet 21st episode with a special guest. We're going to be joined by Lachlan Bayliss from the Newcastle Jets, Kiwi under-23 footballer and rising star of the A-Leagues. We're looking forward to having a chat with Lachie about what's happening at the Jets and also his journey to where he's gotten so far in his football career and what might be ahead for him. Also joining us this week on the show, as always, Mr. Consistent, Lachlan Avil, our key producer man, the man behind the ones and the twos, J.R. Carter. He's going to pop in and make a couple of cameos this week. We're looking forward to seeing where he sneaks into the show to give us some interesting views and different perspective. And, of course, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. He's going to come and dig into a few sporting realms. He's also going to head around the grounds with us and talk about what's happening in the broader sporting world. Of course, if you're wanting to keep up to date with everything that we're doing, you can keep up to date with us on our social media channels. We are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook, and we're on X. And of course, you can find us on Spotify to listen to an audio version or tune into video podcast on Spotify. And of course, our home here on YouTube. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell down below because that will enable you to get alerts every time we drop a video, whether it's a full-length episode or a short on YouTube, and we love to have your support. Give the video a like, as I said, and make sure to share it with some friends. We're looking to continue to grow the platform so that we can bring more sporting coverage to you on an ongoing basis. But without too much further ado, let's dig in and let's get around the grounds. It's time to head around the grounds, and of course, when we head around the grounds, we delve into our deep talent pool of sporting experts. And we've managed to go into the deepest of the talent pool realms. And we've found Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. You're back after a little hiatus last week, Broden, looking very aerodynamic.
Yeah, definitely, mate. When you go to the barbers and ask for a short back and sides, apparently they leave you with something that might not grow back. So fingers crossed it does grow back. Otherwise, I'll be looking very much like our producer who's hidden himself on screen.
I was going to ask you, you did say off air, mate, you made the fatal mistake of saying whatever you want to a very green-looking barber.
Yeah, it was a very snazzy looking one, very well trimmed beard and a different haircut to what I would normally get. And when he asked for the short back and sides now, it turns out it means something a little bit different to what it did probably 10 or 15 or even 50 years ago. So I'm currently rocking what kind of looks like a cross between Dustin Martin and I don't even know what else, but it's interesting. I won't show you the back.
Just trying to wind back the clock. Well, mate, somewhere that hairdo might have fitted in. He's over in Vegas on the weekend with a bunch of NRL footballers partying it up after their games. I saw a couple of former stars, including Sam Burgess, nearly missed his flight. But, we had NRL Vegas. Some of the games might not have been classed as the most competitive. I know the Gillaroos looked more like a cricket score than a rugby league score when they put 90 on the English. But are we saying it's a success? They built numbers from last year. They're getting some influence in the American media. They had a number of other matches and tournaments around it. We talked about that with Adam Martin last week, and there's some interesting stories that come out of that. But do you think it was a success overall? They're slowly trying to build something here?
First things first, mate. We beat the English. Of course, it's a success there, but no, I think it's a resounding success if you ask me. I mean, look at year one. When you are going into these markets, anytime you beat the year before and you're trying something so big and so new, anytime you're better than what you did the year before, it's a success. I mean, it's gathered a lot of the American sport attention, and it's just from now is how can we grow this even further into such a big sporting market?
It is a big sporting market. There's so much opportunities we talked about last week, both from a TV point of view and a gambling point of view now that gambling's more open in the US. And like it or don't like it, it's a part of sport at the moment and certainly will continue to be so for a long time to come in many markets. But there was some interesting pieces of it. I think the scheduling where they sort of went, because I think they had, from memory, the English Super League game, the Canberra Raiders game, and of course the Mighty Milk had a great win over up the Wars, so that was good to beat the Warriors. Then we had the Gillaroos game and then the Penrith game. Unfortunately, because of the lack of competitiveness of the Gillaroos game and the length of the day, a lot of people left during that Gillaroos game, which meant the Panthers and the Sharks, which should be two of our top four contenders this year, didn't have as much of a crowd. It's one of those things. I don't think there's a perfect solution. We talk about this with scheduling all the time, but that might be something they look to tweak to continue to try and maintain and keep the interest and keep the crowd there as long as they can.
Yeah, I think it was just that one game too much. Especially if there was a lot of Americans. I mean, a lot of people were saying there was such an international audience, but let's say you've never seen a sport, in your life, you don't know anything about it, and then suddenly there's 3 games thrown in front of you. Your attention is going to wave, especially when you're in Vegas. Let's be honest, there's so much to do in Vegas. Why would you be sitting there watching a sport you've never seen before 3 times in a row? I mean, you see 1.5 games of it. Yep, I've seen it now. I'll buy into it in the next 6, 12 months. I'll come back here a year later. I think it was just that oversaturation of it. But at the same time, I mean, you talk to a lot of the broadcasters that were over there. They think it was a resounding success over there. The noise in the crowd. I mean, you hear a lot of Americans and a lot of people involved in it over there, and they say the energy that the crowd brought was more than a full stadium there, where there's so many corporate ticket holders. There wasn't for this. Everyone there was genuinely there for the rugby.
Yeah, I think it was a great event. As I said, there were some other things there. We had the NRL Combine. We had the a Nines tournament as well, which we had an Aussie side primarily based in Queensland and Northern New South Wales. They got together a team that won that, which was great to see. But my favourite story that came out of all it, and I don't know if you saw this, Brody, in the lead up, the USA was scheduled to play Greece in a test match, but the game got cancelled, and it was like a day or two before the actual Vegas games. And the reason it got cancelled is because they couldn't turn the lights on because some bastard had stolen the copper wire out of the light poles.
Mate, if that doesn't sum up something to do with Australian or country sports, let alone on a wide scale, like that is the most club third grade division thing you'll ever see. Like the Resi's footballer, you can't play because the owner of the club, he's got the keys and he's in front of his ute and he's away and you can't get in. Or it just seems bizarre. This happens on a national scale, mate. Like I did see that, and when you first see it, you're like, oh, nah, like. Surely not, but yeah, sure enough, this is what happens.
Well, the only way we know it's not country footy is if that happened at the country footy, everyone would have just pulled their Hiluxes and Land Cruisers up around the boundary. But look, the NRL keeps on giving. We've got the round 1 ahead. It's great to have footy back. I know you're chomping at the bit, and we'll talk a little bit later in the show about your code of sleeveless shirt footy a little bit more, mates, and we're looking forward to that as well. It's taken a bit of a dampener, pardon the pun, which we'll get into a little bit later on, but something that hasn't taken a dampener is a bit of motorsport, mate, and I know that the illustrious man behind the shadows will undoubtedly just morph his way in, and there he is, the devil, and he shall appear. J.R. Carter, welcome back to the big screen.
Thank you, Chris. Nice drive-by at the start of the show there, Brody, on my hairline. Like we know I've been suffering from that for a long time, so thank you for bringing the attention to that. One day we might get a show without me wearing a hat, so let's see where we get to there. Big stuff happening in motorsport this week. Formula One testing last week. Testing, look, it's hard to tell what's going on because Carlos Sainz in a Williams was on the top of the sheets. I don't think that's indicative of where we're going to be in a couple of weeks. So let's just brush straight past testing. Like it was all sort of things that we were sort of expecting. Like Hamilton's acclimatized that Ferrari pretty well. The back markers are still back markers, so nothing too impressive there. The big news today is Adrian Newey starting his first day at Aston Martin. So after what was a year of gardening leave, he's now finally allowed to participate within the team.
How good is it to have Adrian Newey back in the motorsport? Because we know he's the Einstein, he is the Nostradamus, he is any other sort of superlative you want to throw at him, all rolled into one. He is the greatest genius F1's ever seen, JR.
He is. So he's the man that's developed like the Red Bull car for since Red Bull's been incepted, really. And like he's been responsible for the development of Max's car throughout all his championships. Last year, we seen Adrian Newey have to move away from Red Bull and do so like with his gardening leave. So because of these non-compete clauses, he was out of the sport for almost a year. But we also seen towards the end of last year that Red Bull does not quite get a little bit further. So is that a sign of things to come? Like, was he the absolute secret sauce at Red Bull?
Well, we will find out because it's going to be interesting. And I think we're talking about this off air. I saw an interesting little video, and I guess you call it just a bit of social media content that someone had built out. The fact that in 2005 there was a 7-time world champion that moved to Ferrari. In 2025 there's a 7-time world champion that moved to Ferrari. There's a number of other alignments, and then it all came to the fact that I think at that time Newey had moved teams as well, and it just kept lining up. And everything that it worked out to, there was about 7 or 8 alignments that led to one thing. And we just talked about it. It's Fernando Alonso winning a championship. And as we said, if there's a duo that can pull out a win against the odds in this championship, it is Newey and Alonso.
Yeah, look, Newey and Alonso is a very exciting championship. The only thing we have to keep in mind is the Lance Stroll factor in all this. Like, is Lance going to be enough of a dead weight to mean that like the car just doesn't develop in the right way?
Well, Lance Stroll, if nothing else, can be a dead weight. We do know that, Brody.
Absolutely, mate. I saw your eyes roll as soon as that name got mentioned, and it is that common thing, isn't it? But I mean, the drivers, yes, they get all the credit, but it is not just the driver once you get to this level of sport. Every inch, every 1% goes a mile in motorsport, and we see it over the time. We've seen it for the last 30 or 40 years. It's the people behind the scenes that are often the reason why the stars are winning time and time again.
They certainly are. It's going to be interesting to see how the season rolls out. I know you're not necessarily a fan, JR, but for those that are, Drive to Survive drops this week as well. And on top of that, next week, in around the time we'll be recording this show, I will be going and seeing one of the greats of Formula One. Gunther is in Australia, and he is doing his rolling road show, which is going to be entertaining to see. He's going to be a personality that, even though he's not involved, I think he's going to be rolled out in a lot of context in the F1 circus this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Gunter's got so much experience and like his time as a team principal. But the bigger thing is Gunter is the entertainer. So that's a really good show, and I look forward to hearing what you've got to say like once you get out of there.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Well, thank you, gents, for joining us on Around the Grounds. Brody, go and refuel, rehydrate, maybe just see what you can do with that hairdo, and we'll get you back in a little breath after we've had a chat with Lachlan Bayliss, Lachlan Avil, and any other Lachlans we can find loitering in the corridors.
Lock it in, mate.
As a special treat for episode 21, we have managed to secure a guest to join us to talk about all things football. So alongside Lachie Avil from Roundball Australia, we are pleased to be joined by Lachlan Bayliss from the Newcastle Jets. Lachie, welcome to the Chris Macpherson Show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lachie, it's probably a good time to be getting you on at the moment. The Jets' form is certainly at a peak for the season. Things are really building in the right direction in Newcastle.
Yeah, they definitely have been, which is really nice to be a part of after definitely a tough start to the season and a tough year last year as well. So it's nice to finally be turning things around and getting on that winning circle.
And in terms of that, we've heard Rob Stanton talk a lot early in the season about the fact that he was backing the youth, and obviously you form quite a key part of that youth brigade alongside some of the guys like Clayton Taylor and others in the squad. Is it a case that's just started to gel? Is it a combination with some of the other players that have come in? Obviously, the other Lachie, which is going to get very confusing in today's interview because we've got our Lachie, but Lachie Rose and Coda coming in as well.
Yeah, I think especially having those older boys, including Cotter, and Charles as well. Lachie Rose has been in great goal scoring form. So it's been so key to have them. I think for myself and the younger boys, we've been given games, so getting heaps of experience, and I think some of us are approaching 50, 25 plus games, and I think it's really starting to all come together at the right time.
You touch on that. It is good experience numbers starting to build through the squad in recent years, and back to the Rob piece, it must be nice to have that support of a manager who, despite the fact that at times from the outside, there was people probably calling for his head. He's stayed the course and backed the talented young squad that he's got and that he was prepared to sort of engage with. And again, I think of names like yours and Clayton as two of the ones that have stood out and taken that next step in the last sort of 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, Rob's been great. Although, the results necessarily haven't gone our way, especially this year, we've been playing good football. And even last year as well, I think the stat was if we stopped games at halftime, we would have won the league or something along those lines. So that highlights we were playing good football, but it was just little bits that were letting us down. And I think especially the last 3 weeks where, maybe we would have conceded a goal late on or not held out the game. I think, it's really starting to come together, and we've learnt from all those experiences.
And in terms of another name that's come in there, a guy that's returned, and I'll sort of double this question up a little bit, is Noah James coming back in. Obviously, some more youthful exuberance. He had to wait 5 years between opportunities. But the other piece that I've noticed, and obviously having the proximity of being the ground announcer there, is seeing how Ryan Scott's been so positive and supportive of him. It would be quite easily for Scotty to be a little bit down on himself and down on his luck and not as supportive. But he's been the first one out after the first win the other week when Noah returned to the squad. He was the first man to get to him when full time went.
Yeah, I think it shows a lot of how Scotty is as a person, and he's been great as well. But it's always good for competition for places, especially in goals. So it's good to see Noah get a chance, and he's doing really well for us. But yeah, and Scotty backs him all the way. They're two of the best mates. So it's really great to see that they're still both pushing each other, and yeah, still great mates.
Lachie, I want to ask you about Kota Mizunuma, because coming into the club, he's clearly a talented footballer. That's one thing. His deliveries off set pieces and in wide areas is very clear for everyone to see. But if I think of imports that have come into the A-League and kind of their personalities, I couldn't think of a more perfect match for him and the Newcastle Jets, because it felt like that kind of dash of positivity and joy that he seems to always play his football with was something maybe you needed a little bit. Obviously, as you say, you've got lots of these young kids, the future's looking bright, but the results haven't quite been coming. What's he been like just in the dressing room and behind closed doors?
Yeah, well, I mean, to sum him up, he's a true professional with 400 J-League games, and he's really seen it all. So to bring that experience to sort of our young group has been invaluable. And just I think the stuff that you don't see is he's constant chatter, although English is his second language. He's still always talking and trying to keep us going throughout the whole game so we don't switch off. But yeah, I think just his actions speak louder than his words as well. With the way he defends, he attacks. It's just really good to have someone like him to guide us and help us get these results.
Does it make you think a little bit differently about what it means to be a professional footballer at that level for so long? Like one thing we've also heard about a lot of these kind of Japanese players coming over is their work ethic and the amount of hours they'll spend in training and recovery of their body and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, even just the little stuff that you see after training, in terms of the recovery, like you mentioned, it's something that I haven't seen before. So, I try and do the same because I want to play till I'm 35, and I mean, it's been great for everyone to have him around.
And how do you think you're travelling on the field this year? You've been lucky to have a lot of consistent minutes, which I'm sure has been really good for your development. How do you feel you've been going?
Yeah, I mean, definitely at the start of the season, I found it a bit difficult because I sort of, moved around positions. I played up front, I played as a winger, I played six. So, I thought I had a few good games here and there, but really struggled to make a position my own. So, I really enjoyed now playing six and sort of earning that spot to play consistent minutes in one position. I think that's been very positive for me, and one opportunity I look to continue to take.
Awesome.
And in terms of obviously the 3 wins on the trot, you've knocked off 2 of the top sides in Melbourne victory convincingly, and then the win against Adelaide. Now you get the chance to host Auckland, who are clear leaders at the top of the table, and we'll talk about your Kiwi heritage in a little bit. Hopefully that's not too much of a conflict this weekend. How do you shape up for this weekend for Auckland? Obviously great to host them on home soil and have that chance to make it 4 in a row.
Yeah, I mean, they're the league leaders for a reason. They've been one of the best, well, the best team all season. But, the A-League's pretty unpredictable. Anyone can beat anyone on their day. So, if they don't turn up, then, they could lose to us, which is would be a big upset. But, we're confident. I feel like it's just really another game. It's not really anything that, that we have to be afraid of. Because 3 wins on the trot against top opposition. We're full of confidence going ahead of this weekend's game.
I'm sure it's not lost on you, and I happened to ask Clayton this on the field after the game last week. I think you might have been doing an interview with Paramount at the time, but I think you guys would have been, in your early double digits, sort of 10 to 12 years of age the last time the Jets managed to accomplish that. So it's no mean feat for a lot of you guys that it's been such a long time, and to get these 3 wins after a tough start must really be, starting to fill you with a bit of pride when you're wearing that jersey.
Yeah, 100%. And especially for myself playing in the academy, I didn't see it too often when I'd go and watch the first team. So to be a part of it's really special. And yeah, hopefully we get the 4th on the weekend.
Excellent, mate. Now, before we let you go, I do want to we touched on obviously the Kiwi heritage, but let's go all the way back. I understand your footballing journey started up in Darwin, mate.
Yeah, that's right. So I was originally, my family was living on the Central Coast, and Dad had a job opportunity up in Darwin. So that's what moved us up there for, I think it was 6 or 7 years. Which, yeah, I was 6 years old, so that really started my love for football up there. And yeah, just played for a local team up there, Minder Laces, and worked my way into the representative team there. I mean, there was only probably 20 kids try out for a team of 18. So, as a 10-year-old playing in a under-13s competition because there was no one else to pick. It was good experience and good exposure. And they had, I forget what it's called now, I think National NTC or something, National Youth Championships down in Coffs Harbour, and the family was going to move back to the Central Coast, and obviously Northern New South Wales were there, and had a look at me and offered me a spot. So that's how I moved to Jets Academy after living in Darwin for 6 years.
There you go. Well, we know Minder Laces has popped their head up a couple of times in recent years. They made the round of 32 there, and it's quite interesting actually. I keep quite an eye. The current manager is my old housemate, so it's a nice little small world.
Oh, really?
The other piece I want to ask you about, and we touched on that New Zealand heritage. You're eligible for, I think it's your dad, for New Zealand, and you played for their under 23s. You had a decision to make though before that, obviously between Australia and New Zealand.
Well, I mean, I haven't really been involved in any of the Australian camps or nothing. So, for New Zealand to give me that opportunity, it's one that it's hard to say no. And to give me a chance to play at the Olympic Games is something that I will never forget. So I'm definitely very grateful for that opportunity. I only got my New Zealand passport probably 2 years ago because I didn't actually realise I could play for New Zealand up until then. So I was a bit disappointed to miss out on the younger age groups, finding out I could have played that. I'm very, very grateful for the experience at the Olympics that I've had with them.
Yeah, that would have been an amazing experience. It's not something that a lot of young footballers get the chance to do. So to have that chance, you say, after not being involved in the Australian development age groups, and even in recent times, a lot of the Aussies haven't made it. So what was that experience like in terms of going away and getting that opportunity? I guess as a men's footballer, it's capped at 23. So
yeah, I mean, it's hard to put into words. Pretty much when we went over, everyone sort of knew each other. They'd been to a camp or stuff like that. They had a stat on the board, and it had all the camps that certain boys that went to, and my name was the only one just completely blank. So I was completely new to it, but it was such a positive environment and very welcoming. So I was very grateful. I think playing against the host nation, France, was an experience there that I won't forget, with Elise and Mateta, Premier League, Bundesliga type players. It really shows you the level of those top footballers, and definitely try to take that over for what I learned over there into this season. Did
you go for the Olympic rings tattoo anywhere?
No, I haven't yet. I haven't got any tattoos, but I've been considering it for sure.
Nice.
Well, one last question before you talk about that top level football. Do you still keep in touch with the illustrious leading goal scorer from last year, AP? He's starting to really find his feet over in Scotland, and that must, I guess, give some hope to some of you young guys as you're starting to develop that there's pathways now to head from Australia, along with lots of those other players that have headed to the top leagues.
Yeah, well, I mean, playing with Stammer last year, although I missed a big chunk, he really worked really hard in training, and you could see, how many goals, 18 goals or something ridiculous he scored on the field. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely very positive for all us young boys coming through that, if we do well, then there's opportunities to go overseas. So, yeah, couldn't be happier for Stammer to be doing so well as well.
It is certainly great to see that pathway coming from the A-League and the Jets. Well, Lachie Bayliss, a huge thanks for your time. Good luck this weekend against Auckland. I know it's going to be an absolute cracker at McDonald Jones on Sunday, so we can't wait to see you and the Jets out there looking for 4 in a row.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Lachie.
Cheers.
Well, a big thank you to our guest for joining us, Lachlan Bayliss. What a thrill it was to have a chat with the young Jets star. Now it's time to get into the A-League Fast Five, and we bring back that man again. He's everywhere. Mr. Consistent from Round Ball Australia, Lachie Avil. Lachie, it's time to get into the A-League more broadly now, and I don't think there's anywhere better to start, mate, as the 8-goal thriller. I know certainly the Round Ball Australia WhatsApp chat was lighting up as Jacob imploded on himself early in this one, but his tune quickly changed.
Yeah, I mean, I imploded pretty quickly on Adelaide in this one as well. When Auckland went 2-0 up, I was tweeting about how impressive it was that they've locked away the Premiers played and they got the win over Adelaide and set themselves apart. They did well to come back, to be fair to them, the Reds. But what a crazy game it was. These teams now, both of the times they played at home and away this season, 2 goals in extra time, 1 each way to keep it a draw. So very early days for this fixture, but they pulled out some very entertaining clashes so far.
Yeah, I heard someone reference this as a clash of AA standards, trying to say it was above and beyond, but I think it was also a play on words, the Auckland and Adelaide. It feels like we need to have a title of some sort for almost every clash now, but ones that are listed in nature like this one is. Look, if we get a game like this that comes, in the peak of the final series, I don't think anyone would be disappointed.
No, and I mean, it's really encouraging. Like, you think of the rivalries that exist around the A-League, a lot of them obviously are city-based, and then you got some teams, with history against each other. And the Adelaide Victory one, the original rivalry, it's one of those that you could probably point to and say that was really generated off the contest that those two teams actually had on the pitch in the early days of the A-League, right? And not a lot of the other rivalries actually have that history on the field as its kind of origin for the rivalry. So 2 from 2 so far between these two teams, and if it gets to the 3 or 4 or 5, especially with a finals clash in there, maybe it could turn into something.
Certainly going to be interesting to see how this rivalry continues to develop. It's certainly getting a bit of spice to it early, as you say. Let's have a look at the competition more broadly, though. Obviously, there was an interesting round. We're getting to a really key piece of the season as the finals race heats up. And as you can see there now, 3 points between 2nd and 7th, 4 points between 7th and 8th. But you feel that there's some of these teams starting to drift away. We know we've seen some recent really good form from Newcastle, as we touched on before, but it's a time where I think, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, you're starting to put lines through people for not just the finals, but for different categories in terms of the competition. I think we talked about this the last couple of weeks. Auckland one hand on the premiership, probably 1.2 after the weekend. Had they won that game, it probably would have been 2 hands on the premiership, you would have thought. But are you prepared to make any other calls on this at the moment? I'm pretty close to saying MacArthur's season's done. Just what we've seen from them in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we know about the departures, all those sorts of things. It's time, if you're a MacArthur fan, to start thinking about the Australia Cup, the 2025-26 season, something else that's not this season.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I think their personnel losses have been big. They're playing Harry Sawyer up top. He's a very different profile of striker. It's different for Millet to suddenly have to rearrange all those different pieces and find a winning formula somewhere. I don't think he's going to find it before the end of this season. And even if he does, he still has 5 points to catch up on Melbourne Victory, who are currently in 6th place. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident to be able to rule the line through MacArthur as well. I think even a draw for Auckland in this game was enough to essentially seal the Premier's plate. The closest competition is Western United, 8 points behind, but Auckland still have a game in hand on them, so it still really is Adelaide, who are back in 3rd now on goal difference. So 8 points, their fixture. They've got a couple of tough away games towards the end of the season, but even then, who out of that middle pack is going to be able to put a consistent enough run together to actually challenge them? None of them have proved that they can do that so far this year. So I'm pretty confident in Auckland. The Jets, as we were talking about before, 3 wins in a row is very impressive, but they got to keep it going. They have to play Auckland up next. So that's going to be tough, but a little bit of spark just because of their recent run. But everyone below them, Gonski.
Yeah, I think, just on Auckland, first of all, that goal difference as well, that's almost another competition point in itself, the massive leg up they've got there, because if you realistically look at it, if they were to lose 3 games, then they would fall behind. And they've got to lose 3 of these remaining, what have they got left, 8 games or so?
Yep.
It seems unlikely when they've lost 2 games all season that they're going to let them split 3 and that Western United or Adelaide are going to win all of their remaining games. So it seems a really big challenge, as you say. I think they're almost there. And yeah, I agree with you. Outside of that, the top 7, obviously Sydney still well in that fight. They're nipping at the heels of Melbourne victory. And again, you could see Sydney, depending on results, if they go on a run or West or Melbourne victory, could quite easily finish second the way the ladder sits. That's how tight they're crazy.
Yeah, ridiculously tight. And Sydney, I think, will definitely come good. They're away in South Korea at the moment, so they have another bye coming up in between there. AFC Champions League 2 quarterfinal match against Jeonbuk. But for me, they have to come good. They have too much quality not to make the final series. And then it becomes a question of who drops out. And you're looking at Melbourne City, Western Sydney are both trending upwards at the moment. Adelaide United slipping down, but have a little bit of a buffer built up. So by process of elimination, I'm looking at Melbourne Victory sitting there just 1 point outside the 6 and not a great run of form recently. They turned it around a little bit after, 6 or 7 straight no win games under Arthur Dillers. They had a couple of wins in there, but then they've kind of returned back to the mean. So I'm looking at them as the ones that could potentially fall out of it.
I think we'll get in a minute, but there's certainly some really key games this weekend when it comes to this inside the top 6 securing or making sure they're claiming those points and continuing to build that and winning the games that they have to win, so to speak, as we call them. Let's just switch tacks now. We've had a look at the men's ladder. Let's talk about the women's. It was a bit of a weird weekend in the women's A-League because all 3 teams that were in the bottom 3, Sydney FC, Newcastle and Western Sydney, all won game. Western Sydney all of a sudden are almost the form team of the competition, left at about 8 weeks too late.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the exact mirror image of the Jets in the men's competition, right? Like 3 wins in a row, but have you left your run too late? They've still got, 9 points to catch up on to get into the 6 with, 5 games to go in the dub, right? It's even less time than the Jets have in the men's competition. So have they left it too late? Absolutely, yes. That's too much of a gap to build up. But you still have an exciting race for finals. Obviously, it's like, you see Canberra sitting in 7th there, just on goal difference, so that can still go in and out. And the Wellington Phoenix probably aren't too far away as well.
I put a line through Wellington a couple of weeks ago. I'm happy to leave that line there. I'll even colour it in.
Okay.
I just think we saw Canberra on the weekend. They had they held on for a draw against Melbourne City. I think they are a finals level team. I don't think Wellington are the way they're performing at the moment. Wellington, you got to remember, started this season red hot the first 5 or 6 weeks, and since then they haven't done a lot. So I just don't see them building enough consistency to realistically over these next 5 games get what will probably need to be somewhere between 7 and 9 points out of those 5 games to ensure that they can close the gap and get forward. I mean, if they get 7 points out of those 5 games, that would be a good result the way Wellington are performing at the moment. But that then only requires Canberra or Central Coast to get 4 points from their remaining 5 games, which you would expect one of those 2 will do. So that's where I just see. I don't see them winning 3 games on the run at home. I just think it's a little bit too far. If they had the longer season like the men's do, then it'd be a very different story. But I think a bit like the men's A-League 2, Melbourne City, even though they had that draw on the weekend, they've got 75% of a grip on that Premier's plate. Melbourne Victory dipping at their heels, though, and starting to close the gap. So it's not all done, but I just think that Melbourne City's momentum should get them there. They're not losing games, but they probably need to make sure they're winning a couple more because they've had a few draws recently.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just by the nature of the length of the season, it's a little tighter, right? Because Melbourne Victory, yes, they're 5 points down, but with the game in hand, all of a sudden, if you get the points on the board that you probably should, then it's just one result and it could go all the way down to the final round, right? So it's been a mammoth task for Melbourne Victory just to put the consistency of results together to stay in touch with City, which is a further compliment of how well that group has performed to be so far ahead at this point of the season, still without a loss as well, which is very impressive. So, yeah, they were held, as you say. Canberra, you're probably right. They look like a finals team, right? Nice little celebration as well on the weekend between Maya Markovsky. I forget the other one as well, but putting some celebrations together on the field always, lifts up the morale of the team as well. And they're playing some good football. So, look, Melbourne City obviously still the team to beat. But if Melbourne Victory win the games they should, then they have a chance to push it right down to the wire.
They certainly do. And when it comes to this race, I think Brisbane, we talked about them for a long time, but recent form, it's either got to be them or Central Coast, I think, that are going to drop out. Western United's been on some decent runs of patches and are a consistently good enough team on paper. Brisbane have, we know that they lost the older of the Fryer sisters with the transfer, but it's just a situation now, so the transfer and the injury, I should say.
Yeah.
It's now a situation where they just seem to be lacking that depth and that 1-2 punch, and they're looking for certain players to carry a bit more ready for their careers. And I wouldn't be surprised if Canberra do sneak in if it is at the expense of Brisbane.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Lani Fryer, she scored a pretty good goal on the weekend, that little chip over the top. So who knows how much they're really missing Sean. Of course, she's a great player. She's a Matilda. She scored a bucket load of goals last season, and she's continued up that form here. So it's a big loss, obviously. The Raw, the Central Coast Mariners, even Western, I know there's a clear 3-3 in terms of the finals positions. Obviously, Western have that game in hand, so Brisbane, Central Coast and Canberra all have an opportunity to catch up those points that they are trailing behind. So it feels like it could be any of those four that miss out, and Canberra definitely feel like they have the momentum coming up. And then it's who's going to displace them, right? And all those three teams lost on the weekend. So there's plenty of opportunity.
Certainly interesting. Let's keep moving things along. Let's have a look to the week ahead. As I said, there's some banana peel games in the A-League men's. There's these sides in the top six playing against sides in the bottom six. And I look at a couple of these, and I think they're really key. And the one that really jumped out to me, and we'll talk about Newcastle and Alfred in a second, but is the Melbourne Victory versus Central Coast Mariners game. That's going to be a very interesting one for us.
Yeah, I think that's the most likely clash to have an upset. And to be fair, nothing against the Mariners. I don't think they're a big reasoning in my thought process here. I've just been really unimpressed with what Melbourne Victory put out the last couple of weeks. I thought the defensive pair of Roderick Miranda and Brandon Hamill were quite poor on the weekend. You're playing Brisbane Raw. It's a team that's won one game all year, and you're letting Amanatides just walk in behind on about 3 occasions, and you're crossing your fingers and hope he didn't score, which he didn't. They got lucky, right? They should have been put away within the first half hour, and it took a very fortunate goal from Casey Boss late on to just scrape a point away from Brisbane, which is not a situation you want to be in. So, as I said before, I think they haven't really returned anywhere close to the form they had under Patrick Kisnorbo at the start of the season. And I'm definitely looking towards that fixture as a sign of saying, yeah, Central Coast, they're probably the one team from that bottom kind of 6 or 7 that could look to cause an upset here.
Yeah, we'll certainly be looking at that one. A couple of other key games there. Adelaide up against Brisbane. Adelaide will want to get back to that winners circle to try and push that case for a top 2 finish. And Newcastle and Auckland, which we will pick apart with our guest Lachlan Bayliss as well. So certainly some really mouth-watering clashes. And to close this out, Lachie, let's talk dub. Again, talk about that look ahead. And there's some key games here. One is Melbourne Victory up against Canberra. We just talked about these two teams. Melbourne Victory continuing to close up on Melbourne City. Canberra, they're nipping at the heels of the final. So this one's got a lot in it, and we've got Matilda Stars coming back in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who'd you say Canberra were coming up against? Is Victory, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, Victory. Yeah. So, look, this is a really good opportunity for them, right? Because they've had these games, but a draw against City was kind of the marker to say, oh, okay, you're actually real about it, right? And then coming up, a chance to play Melbourne Victory is another team that's going to be right up there. So if you're getting a result out of this, you're saying, you know what, we put some wins together against some teams lower down the table, but heading in towards finals, we've actually just proven that we can take it to the best in the competition. So that's going to be massive for them. And then, yeah, Brisbane, when you're trying to look to stop a run of bleeding like that, the last thing you want to do is see that the undefeated team on top of the ladder are coming to town to try and knock you off. So, yeah, going to be tough for them for sure.
Certainly, well, got other interesting ones. Wellington versus Western Sydney. We touched on Wellington, not in great form. Western Sydney has turned theirs around and Newcastle versus Sydney a chance to claw their way, possibly at the expense of the other, off the bottom of the ladder. Lots of interesting games to watch across the weekend. It's a big weekend of both men's and dub. But the last thing before we get out of soccer altogether, Lachie, is the Aussie under-20s. Mate, we have to doff our cap to them. They've added another piece of silverware to the trophy cabinet for Football Australia.
Yeah, really impressive. This was a team that is probably a lot of people are watching them and screaming out and saying this is the kind of football that we really wanted to see from our senior national teams over the last 2 years, which is a massive compliment to Trevor Bayliss and his coaching staff and these boys and what they've been able to do. Champions of Asia. It's just the third time that Australia's ever been able to say that across any age category, men's or women's as well. Obviously the Matildas in 2010 and then the Socceroos on home soil in 2015 as well. And for me, a clear pointer as to why this success was achieved is that going in to the last Under-20 Asian Cup, it was something like 2,500, somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 minutes, something like that, of A-League football had been played by the players in that squad. This time it was up to 12,000. So obviously we know the reason why we got here. It's probably not the ideal situation, but the fact is a lot of young, talented Australian footballers have been playing more senior minutes in the A-League, and it's come to fruition here. It was a great tournament from these guys. Alex Boladato won the player of the tournament. I thought Paul Ocon-Exler and Daniel Benny were standouts as well. They put a really good tournament together and they deserved to win it. And what a moment it was.
Great to see, and hopefully lots of names we'll see in the future of the Socceroos. We look forward to watching their progression over time, both in the A-League, abroad, hockey colours. We want to take a bit of a break, excuse you for the evening, Lachie, and again, we look forward to talking to you all about all things football.
Cheers, Chris.
A big thanks to Lachlan Avil doing some heavy lifting around the round ball game. It's now time to turn to one of the egg balls, as someone called them to me the other day, and that was clearly a football soccer fan. And the Red Sharon is back out, well, mostly back out, and we're joined again by Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. Broads, the season's right upon us. So the Third Man Up podcast is back into production and undoubtedly talking all things footy.
It has, mate. I literally just got off the podcast with the big man, the great man, Spider Everett, and he's holding on for dear life up there at the moment. Obviously based up there on the Gold Coast, doing Brekkie Radio. So some wild scenes up there, mate.
Certainly is some wild scenes. We know Cyclone Alfred coming down along the coast. It's taken that wonderful 105-degree right turn, which still bemuses me how they predict these things, because that just looked like bizarre. It looked like something that would happen, someone driving home from the pub after way too many schooners. Like, it was just heading down the coast in a nice casual manner, and then they're like, no, it's definitely going to turn right here. And sure enough, it has. Looks like it's going to make landfall in Brisbane. So, first of all, our thoughts are with, everyone in Brisbane and south of there, because they're telling us that the way the wind works, that it's all going to, the water and everything that's going to come with it is going to come further down all the way down into northern New South Wales. So our thoughts are with everyone there. Hopefully they're staying safe. But it ties into the fact that opening rounds now been impacted. This wonderful initiative that the AFL's launched to try and I'm not sure what they're trying to capture on this year, because it doesn't sit in open space with the NRL. But anyway, they've pursued with the perception of it. You're shaking your head already. So you're obviously, are you just dirty there's no games in South Australia this weekend, or what's happening?
Mate, we get gather around, we get live golf, we get everything here in South Australia. It's a new sporting capital, let's be honest. But opening round, biggest joke of a thing. I mean, let's be honest, let's give credit where credit's due. NRL smashed the AFL with this opening round here. If you're going to do it, bring it back to where majority of the heart of football is. I mean, MCG, Thursday night footy, let's open with that. Let's get 90,000 people there. Let's build the season on that. Nothing wrong with opening it with Brisbane and Geelong, but at the same time, if you want to capture the rest of Australia's attention, do it in front of 95,000 people at the MCG here. Obviously, Brisbane and Geelong and Gold Coast and Essendon now wiped out. I mean, what is it? 700 mils of rain and 130k winds they're predicting with it. So yeah, like you mentioned, thoughts go out to everyone. But in terms of opening round, mate, I really don't like it. I mean, we've seen so many injuries to key stars with all these preseason games, all these match simulations. I mean, preseason starting earlier, but also these match simulations, and there's more preseason games than there ever has been. And I think that's the main reason why we're seeing more and more injuries. So Opening round, I reckon scrap it. Let's kick it off properly next week. Give the NRL their dues. They're going over to Vegas. That's a massive risk, let's be honest, that they've done, and it's paid off for them. So unless they want to go over there and start in New York and over there, and I don't think there is there's, I'd maybe say 20% of Australia wants it, or 20% of AFL fans want it.
Yeah, I think the challenge is last year, I understood where they came from. While the NRL was in Vegas, it was kind of while the cat's away, the mice will play in New South Wales and Queensland. But this year, and I understand the theory of it, maybe not the practice and how it was ended up being executed. But this year, and take the weather out of it and all those sorts of things, this year they've done it when they're back. So it doesn't actually make any sense because you don't have a clear slate. It's one of these bizarre sort of things that they've just gone, oh, we're just going to persevere with it. Now season's going to fall. Then, oh, well, they've gone a little bit earlier. Oh, well, too bad. We're just going to do it anyway. And so it's actually counterproductive to what they're doing because they've diluted their product up against a resolved and strengthened NRL product that's had a really successful Vegas, as we talked about off the top of the show. And now the sentiment for NRL in Sydney and Brisbane at the moment is going to be off the charts. So it's an interesting piece as to what they're absolutely thinking or what they're not thinking. It's it looks like they've been taking some management guidelines from the maybe the APL. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a weird one. As we said, it's now just going to be 2 games. You would suspect that those other 2 games will just slot into next weekend somewhere, depending on availabilities.
Yeah, I think round 3, Geelong and Brisbane definitely have the bye, so I presume that'll get slotted in that one. But I think the Gold Coast Essendon one will. That's going to be a little bit different because I think they have buys on different weekends. So where that matches up, but both teams are in agreement. You know, this is not something that one team wanted to go forward with, or something that the other team didn't. This is something that they come together and look. This is out of our control. And I think well done the AFL. Well done for the Queensland government. I mean, this is sport. This isn't real life. So. Thoughts go out to everyone up there. But in other news, mate, Sydney and Hawthorn kicking off Friday night the AFL season.
Yeah, that's a weird one we didn't see coming. 2 teams that are in different sorts of transition heading into the season, mate. Sydney with a new coach for the first time in a long time, which will be interesting, and Hawthorn, they're up amongst the favourites for the flag.
They are. Now look at this one, Dean Cox. I'm not sure how good your history is, but I think he might be the first ever ruckman to be a full-time coach at an AFL club. I can't remember the last, full-time ruckman to be an actual coach. So he's come out and he wants to bring back the unsociable Sydney, the Sydney that, a very high pressure tackling side, and still be involved with that, that Bloods culture that everyone's going through. But I think you're going to see a more physical side of Sydney last year rather than focusing on that uncontested possession they were known for. And I mean, Hawthorn, they were the team that surprised everyone. They were everyone's bottom 4 picks at the start of last year, and their young guns just got on a roll. And then bringing in the likes of Tom Barras, one of West Coast best backmen for the last 10 years, and Josh Battle was a free agent from the Saints. It's going to allow James Sicily just to either free up across halfback or even potentially swing forward when the time does come for that. So Hawthorn, I think they're going to be a big watch. I don't think they're going to be as good as what everyone's saying they are. We see it when a team spikes up the ladder. They do generally drop down and then create that gradual leap back up and then become a consistent team. And when we even saw it with Collingwood, yes, when they spiked, they won the flag. Then last year they completely missed finals after that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Hawthorn finish top 4. I also wouldn't be surprised to see him finish 11th or 12th at the same time.
You really hedged your bets there. I like that. I just like the poetry of Dean Cox, the man whose heart was broken by Sydney in 2005. 20 years later now has to rebuild the club. Anyway, we'll wait and see how that all pans out. Obviously, the other game is 2 teams, and this has become a bit of a quasi-rivalry in AFL in recent years, and that is Collingwood and GWS. I think they're both teams that lots of people from other teams really don't, or really like to not like.
Oh, mate, GWS is everyone's second favourite team, mainly because of their social media, let's be honest. Their social media, them and Hawthorn, I think, are the 2 best sporting organisations on the socials in Australia across any sport. But let's be honest, last year, Pies come in absolute hot favourites for the flag again to go back-to-back, and everything that could have gone wrong did. Injuries, player unavailabilities, dropping games that they shouldn't. But then on the other hand, GWS up by 4 goals to get a home final against the Swans, and then playing Brisbane up by 3 goals with 5 minutes left and go down by 5 points. So it's a year that could have been, and it's just going to be so. I think the first quarter here is going to be probably one of the best first quarters you're going to see nearly all year. Both teams picking up a lot of players in the off-season. I mean, there's been so much talk about Collingwood and their ageing list. I mean, bringing in Dan Houston, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the comp, one of the best kicks as well. Josh Dacos moving across to a half-back flank. But then again, probably not playing this week, but Jake Stringer moving up to the Giants, and from all reports had been absolutely flying during the preseason, which would absolutely piss off every Essendon fan in the world, I think.
I think they've got enough on their plate, the poor Essendon fans. It's been 75,000 days since they last won a final or something. I think it was when Jesus was still a young lad. It's an interesting one when we talk Essendon. As we start to shift away from these games, and again, it's weird to think that we've now got an opening round with 2 games, but for obvious reasons, and we are where we are. The season proper, who are your tips? We've got some smokies. We've got Adam Martin came on last week. We talked NRL, and he had some, big improvers, big sliders, some tips for the individual awards. What do you got for us, Broads? I know you've been poring over the form guide and taking in every detail of these pre-season matches and scratch matches and everything else they've been doing, playing at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, whatever these teams have been doing, because obviously that matters very importantly to what happens in September.
Yeah, look, I've got probably the 2 biggest rises for this year are going to be, for me, Fremantle and Adelaide. We probably see that Fremantle Guernsey behind me, but everything's there for Fremantle at the moment. Like, their list is finally at a stage where they can't be not making the 8. I mean, they've got so many stars on their list. They've got Shai Bolton come over from Richmond and just adds that genuine outside pace they've been craving. And this time next year, if Cozzy Pickett isn't wearing purple, mate, I'll be so surprised as well on that. And then the Adelaide Crows. I mean, they're 6-7 years into a rebuild for a club that doesn't generally rebuild. You rarely see the Crows bottom out, but now, I mean, you look at him, Riley Thilthorpe's come back and he just looks like a hillbilly beast of a full forward with a mullet, and it just looks like he could just tear a game away in 5 minutes. Isaac Rankin's move into the midfield. Jordan Dawson now not being relied upon just to win him games off his own boot. And then, Isaac coming in, this James Peatling coming into the side as well. I think it adds depth, and for so long the Crows' bottom 6 was their top 18 was as good as everyone's in the league, as good as anyone's, but their bottom 6 was where they fell away, and they no longer have that drop off. And I think you'll see a big spike from both of them.
Yeah, looking forward, I think Adelaide coming back is a really good story. Fremantle, as much as I know that you'll love it more than I would. It'd be a nice story if they could finally break that drought, as funny as it's been. Because the more droughts that get broken while Essendon keeps having theirs, that's always good fun. Can you give me any hope? Is North Melbourne going to improve at all? We've signed all right, I think. A bit of experience around. Luke Parker can't be bad.
Well, it's funny, mate. I actually just got off this with Spider, and I said I wouldn't be surprised to see North not make the 8, but be halfway through the year, they'll be around the 8 to 12 mark, I think. I mean, you look at Luke Parker coming in, Caleb Daniel coming in. I wouldn't be surprised. I even said we both called it Luke Parker to be a surprise All-Australian at the end of the year. He's going to be get thrown into to that midfield. And we saw grand final day when the time come. He actually was one of the few that stood up for the Swans, kicking 3 goals and ending up with about 20 possessions. And I really think that Harry Sheasel moving across half forward now rather than half back. That's where he played all his junior footy. He was kicking 30 to 40 goals a season and still managing that 20 to 25. In a Jordan De Goey kind of a role, splitting his time. He's an absolute superstar, and I'd much rather 20 to 25 Harry Sheasel disposes across half forward than 40 to 45 across half back. Because that means if he's got across half forward, if he's not kicking him, he's going to be setting up Nick Lachie very well up there. So I see North being it's time. They can't keep sitting at that 14th to 18th. They've got to. I mean, you got Clarko. You're spending big money off the field. You've got to start rising sooner or later.
Yeah, I also like from an experience point of view that Jack Darling coming in. Gives us a target to work to. And again, we've got some good young developing forwards that he can lead and, shape. He's still 32, so he's got a couple of years. I think we've seen that. So, certainly happy with those. And if we can just re-sign LDU. That'd be nice. But anyway, that'll be something that'll play out over time. So, yeah, I've got a similar view on them. I think they'll probably end up running. Even 10th or 11th would be a good year for us. So it'll be interesting to see. The big questions are who walks away with the big prizes, who takes your Brownlow, who takes the Premiership Cup at the end of September.
Yeah, for me, he's a short price favourite, but I mean, Nick Dacos. He's such a star of the game. I mean, we've seen the umpires. He's a player that catches the eye of the umpires. Nothing to do with the way he plays, but he's just a star. He works hard, he distributes well, and he kicks goals. And we know umpires absolutely love goal-kicking midfielders. We've seen that time and time again. I think I've got a couple of smokies. I think Jason Horne-Francis will poll really, really well this year. And my other smoky that I've got, Will Day from the Hawks. I mean, he obviously missed out towards the end of last year. He's come back. The shoulder's all good. And he's going to be splitting his time between forward and mid a lot more. I mean, he's 194. He's a similar height to Nat Fyfe. He's athletic, very good in the air. So I think if Hawthorn win enough games, I think you'll see Will Day poll maybe 6 or 7 3 votes.
I'll tell you one that one of my mates, and he knows how mad I am about North Melbourne. He said that, if you can find the each way betting in the Brownlow, he actually likes Sheasel coming off that half forward to poll quite a lot of votes this year. It'll be exciting with attacking possessions, and if they do exactly what you predicted and sort of sit around it just outside the 8, the challenge you see in a lot of those good teams is they steal votes from each other. We talked about it with the Dally M last week. Is Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner are good examples. When Sydney go really well, they go week for week with getting votes, right? So. I think Sheasel could be an interesting one that's right up there, depending on how North perform. But yeah, I think it's hard to go past Nick Dacos. It's no surprise that he's about a third of the odds of the next best in betting when you look at the Heenies and the Cripps of the world.
And if we can be honest, let's not see another 50 vote Brownlow medal. I mean, that was an absolute joke last year. As good of a year Patrick Cripps had, you can't tell me the year that Dusty Martin, where he averaged 29 and 2 goals a game. Patrick Cripps was nearly twice as good as that. Yeah, it was. I think the umpires really need to start looking at people other than the stars of the teams. You see people stand up and play, someone who might be a role player and then to stand up and get 35 and it's best on ground won't even get a vote. The umpires are now favouring those stars of the game. So let's get it back to a normal count and I'll be much happier.
Yeah, that would be nice to see. It's one of those things you talked about it with Dacos before, right? There's certain players, and again, we talked about this with the NRL last week. There's certain players who just tend to poll in the NRL. Kalen Ponga's a great example. Paddy Cripps is one of those. Like, don't get me wrong, he deserved to win the Brownlow medal, but the number of votes that he drew in some of those games was surprising, might be the nicest way of putting it. So, yeah, it's one of those things that certain players, it's, the old thing, when you probably had this when you were a kid, I don't know. It's like, when you're playing a rep trial, wear odd socks or odd boots because you stand out. Paddy Cripps doesn't need to do that. He just stands out because he's Paddy Cripps. The umpires love him. He probably, I don't know, he probably washes their cars in his spare time. I'm not sure what he does, but he's obviously, he's there in front of them and he's seen a lot more than some other players who might be delivering similar levels versus someone, as you said, Dusty, who maybe because of some of his personality traits isn't on as, cordial terms. And again, they're all things that play in. I still find it bizarre that umpires who are running around, getting their heart rate up to 80% of their maximum, are meant to come off the ground and work out exactly who was the best 3 players on the ground.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, Nick Dacos, the second most votes in a season all time, behind Patrick Cripps. And you can't sit there as good as Nick Dacos' season was and tell me that was the second best season that anyone's played in AFL history. I mean, it's the way that the votes are going. Definitely don't like it. But yeah, like you said, mate, it's something that when you are umpiring, I mean, I've done it back home and then you go back and you're trying to remember what happened in the first quarter sometimes. And I mean, Bontempelli, if you ask me who's been the best player in the AFL in the last 10 years, that's it for me. It's Marcus Bontempelli, who's got no Brownlow medals to his name.
It's a funny thing like that, isn't it? There's always going to be some nuance and some debate is what we love about the sport. Anything else you've got for us to lead us into the AFL season? Anything to watch? Any developing, trends, stories? Anything else you want to throw at us, Broads?
I think it's, yeah... The All-Australian concept is something that's it's always very much talked about. It's a team of midfielders. Usually, they name four in the midfield, 2 inside midfielders on wings, 2 inside midfielders and a half forward and forward pockets, and trying to sink a couple into the back pockets. I think, by the sounds of it, what they might be doing now is actually putting in squads of wingers who are genuine wingers, forwards, and to be a forward, you must have kicked over so many goals and then back to back. So you're going to be some absolute stars missing out, some players who might finish top 5 in the Brownlow medal, but that's not what it's about. It's about all-Australian team. If you're going to name them, I mean, let's be honest, if you wouldn't be putting Clayton Oliver in a back pocket even if he gets 40 possessions. Like, it's just, let's take it away. And sounds like that's what's going to be happening.
That is awesome news. It is well deserving, and we're happy to see that. And JR has made an appearance in the AFL segment. I like this. This is twice for the day.
Look, I just got to ask a question, because we've been on a theme the last couple of weeks about All-Star weekends. Are we at the point for the AFL where, like, maybe that's the route we need to go down rather than just this general All-Australian concept?
Yeah, well, I was actually talking to Spider in a similar way and said it was the Indigenous All-Stars at the game against Fremantle, and Fremantle rolled out and they weren't going any harder than 60% because they were playing against their own players, and it's right before the season. And with how much money gets put in, I think if you're going to do it, either do it 6 weeks before the season starts, when players they've got most of their preseason program in, they're just starting match sims, do some sort of a thing there. But you can't be doing it mid-season. You can't be doing it end of season. If you're going to do it, it has to be 2 weeks ago. That's where I'd be going with it. And that's where the state of origin comes in. And there's a lot of talk now of it coming back next year. The players have come out and said that they want it. The coaches and the owners of the teams are saying they don't want it back. But if the players want it back, you can't stop the players. They're the ones who bring the money to the game.
Of course, the owners don't want it back, and the people running the clubs, because they're risking their property. And I use that term very loosely, just any. If there are any AFL players out there, I'm not calling you property, but that's how it's kind of, viewed in terms of a commercial sense. It's a risk to what they end up delivering as a product. It's a risk to the bums on seats they get, the revenue they generate, all these sorts of things. That said, as much as I think from a pure logistical and practical sense that it makes sense to play it pre-season, I would use the counter-argument of how successful the NRL state of origin is mid-season. But again, I don't know what concept the AFL formed in terms of their state of origin. Like, I have a view that, potentially having, a 4-team origin series in AFL would work really well. And one of those sides actually being an Indigenous side. I think that would be really cool to see. And again, that might need to be, as you say, it might need to be pre-season to concept test it. But again, I'm not exactly sure. Like, obviously, one of the teams would be the Vics. What your other 2 teams exactly would work out to be then. You go Vics, SAWA, but then you're leaving out the emerging states or the allies or whatever else they called it. So I think there's something there, though, Brody, in terms of that sort of concept. It allows the Indigenous heritage, which is so crucial to the AFL. It's also crucial to the NRL and a number of other sporting codes in Australia, to be recognised. And obviously those players relish that opportunity to play for their culture, but it also gives players the opportunity to play for their states as well.
I'd even go 6, which would be Victoria, South Australia, WA, Tasmania, obviously coming in wanting to push them and their new side, allies and Indigenous All-Stars, and then do it in a round robin format where it's 2 halves of football. So each game is only a half, so you're playing 2 25-minute quarters, and it's a round robin format. So teams 1, 2, 3 play on the Saturday, teams 1, 2, 3 play on the Sunday. Finals, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, all in half-game format. So then you're not getting players that are, coming out and sore as anything, and maybe on, potentially on the Monday.
I'll throw a counterclaim at you to get full games of footy in, and that is essentially having an elimination bracket. You can do it with 6 teams, the defending grand finalists from the year before, and you might start with the seeding. You might say the Indigenous and the Victorian teams are the ones that get the bye into the semi-finals. And you play this what is essentially 5 games then over a week period, starting sort of Monday, Tuesday, have the Wednesday, the rest, Thursday, Friday, and then play the final game on the Sunday. Again, put it out to tender like they did with Gather Round, and I'm sure there'll be some governments that'll throw up quite a lot of money for that.
Turn it into a festival of football, effectively.
Yeah, correct.
We already got that Gather Round.
When is too many festivals of football too many? No.
That's right. And
too many festivals
South
in
Australia
general.
too far to go.
Oh, that's it. We could have it in the NT in February. That'd be wonderful. Maybe Tasmania when they finally get that new stadium. But yeah, look, I think there's a great concept there. But the great thing is, footy's right upon us. I know that I'm chomping at the bit. I know JR, as much as people may not realise this, is actually a football fan in terms of AFL. That's in your blood, JR.
It's a family thing. It's something that I was brought to as opposed to came to.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, we'll take all comers here. So, and look, your team's got to be better than North Melbourne unless you're a Richmond fan. So you're going well.
Well, my team's going very well, being the Brisbane Lions, so everything's good.
Very good. Well, Brody might be on that podium this year cheering for those Fremantle Dockers. I doubt I will be with North Melbourne, but the one thing is we will continue to talk AFL. We'll try and get some good guests on during the year. And as always, Brody, a big thank you for you for talking all things Sharon. We might change that red ball for a white ball, a little cricket ball in a moment. We'll head down, get our kit on, ready for the nets, and go and pick apart the Champions Trophy in a moment.
Sounds good.
And we're still here with Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. And now moving on from AFL, it's time to talk cricket. And I know we're going to get a little bit fired up here, Brody, but let's just talk. Essentially, as we're recording, we're heading in. We're in the semi-finals windows. Everything's happening with the Aussie semi-final. But the semis, the finals, how are you seeing it playing out? This will be very out of date by the time we go live, and we'll probably be completely wrong.
Yeah, look, anytime Australia come up against India, mate, I just kick back and know that we've got it because we've got a man who just absolutely loves playing against India. Was seen in Sri Lanka with a beer in one hand and a durry in the other one, and that is Travis Head, the true father of India. It's just someone, I know he's probably going to completely make me look silly the time this goes to air and he's going to get a duck and get hit for 10 off his first over, but it's just... It would be brilliant with everything that's happened over the last month with this. And the more you read about it, the more you just realise how ridiculous and how tailor-made it is for India to win this trophy. I would love to see Australia knock them off, but just as much, I would love to see South Africa with their travel arrangements come back after flying to Dubai and then having to go all the way back. I'd love to see them knock off New Zealand at the same time, even though I do love New Zealand cricket.
Look, if Australia can get through this semi-final, either way, it's a cracking semi-final, a cracking final. I'd probably rather play New Zealand because I don't want there to be the shine taken off if we beat them and then we go to the World Test Championship to play them again in South Africa. But it's an interesting one. The one I want to ask you about, and again, we'll know what the outcome is by the time we get here, but what are you doing if you're George Bailey and the selectors when it comes to the fact that Matt Short's out of action? Are you bringing in Fraser McGurk? What are you going with?
Look, this sounds silly, but I would nearly bring in another bowler. I'd bring in a specialist. I'd bring in Tanveer Sangha. We saw how much that pitch spun last time. I actually think our batting is brilliant at the moment. Josh Inglis to open with Travis Head would be the way I go about it. Two cricketers who, when they're going, I mean, if they make it to 40 overs, Australia win by a long way. Like, let's be honest. If one of them gets going, Australia wins. That's just the way I look at it there. And I think Tanveer Sangha, yes, minimal experience in this lineup, but someone who can spin the ball with his wrist both ways is going to be crucial into beating this Indian side. I know it's not going to happen, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You feel that it's going to go batter for batter, but I agree that it's not necessarily the obvious. Well, it is probably the obvious for many solution, but I'm not sure it's the solution that we need go about. I think there's some other things that might shape up a little bit better for us when you have a look at it. I'd even suggest that I looked at it and just went, India are known for playing pace. They're used to the spin. Known for playing spin. They're used to the spin in this surface at Dubai. I wondered about maybe bringing in like an Aaron Hardy to give you a bit of both. Exactly that same change that you talked about. But yeah, I think Josh Inglis opening in the form he's been in gives us a great look. It's further backing of him. But yeah, I think either way, I think we've got some good options. I'd love to see Jake Fraser McGurk, after he's been sort of given a bit of a hard time in recent times, come in and open the batting and absolutely just, even if he only got like 40, but managed to take 40 away in the first 6 overs before he got out, just absolutely pumping them. That'd be great to see.
Yeah, it would. I just have, as much as I hate to say, I've got zero faith in Jake Fraser McGurk right now, but at the same time, it's sometimes these moments like this which completely make a cricketer, and we've seen it in the past before when everyone's been bashing someone, players, media, everyone, and they come out and they make a big score. Let's not forget 2 years ago, Travis Head was dropped from an Indian Test series. Look at him now. He's arguably Australia's most important player. They said he couldn't play spin. His own selected at the time, Andrew McDonald, his own coach, said he had a weakness to spin. Now he's Australia's best performer against India in India. And it's just sometimes biting the bullet and giving these players a shot. Then all of a sudden, 2 years' time, we could be talking about Jake Fraser-McGurk, the next captain of Australia. Like, we don't know, but giving him a crack, it's going to go one or two ways. He's going to make a big score. He's making not much. So it's going to be box office if he does play.
Certainly is. In the other game, Aiden Markram in doubt for South Africa. That's a big blow if he's not able to play for them. Up against Matt Henry, who's leading all wicket takers coming in. And again, I know there hasn't been a plethora of games played, but Matt Henry just bowls absolute wheels at the moment.
He does. And for someone bowling that fast, he's really accurate, and he bowls full and he bowls at the stumps. And it sounds so silly in cricket. I mean, there's all these new shots, there's all these, wide deliveries, everything, but full and straight, mate. Full and straight gets wickets. And we see it time and time again in every single format. You attack the stumps, you get wickets. Yes, sometimes you're going to go for runs, but if you're bowling absolute wheels, why not do that?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The one thing is we know Iyer, Gill and Kohli are in form for India, so we're going to need to shut them down. But I'm looking forward to it. So who's your tip? What's the final going to look like, Broads?
It's going to be Australia and New Zealand, I'm going to call it, mate. I'm just going to back our boys in tonight. And with Virat Kohli playing, I'm surprised Australia haven't done a secret flyover for Scotty Boland just to see what he's doing, just to maybe get his bunny in, just bring him in, bowl him 2 over spell, and then let him rest up. So... But unfortunately, he's back here playing some Sheffield Shield.
Imagine if we had flown him in as a replacement for Matt Short. Kohli would have been puckering. The other thing, and I think I sent this to you during the week, is the amount of trophies that Australia now hold. Is that we're in a position over the next little bit, if we could win the World Test Championship, defend the World Test Championship, win our series in the Worrell Trophy.
Yep.
The Frank Worrell Trophy, and then the Ashes will then head into the T20 World Cup, which is the only trophy we would then not hold. So basically at the moment, the only major trophies we don't hold, calling ICC tournaments and bilateral test trophies, are currently the Champions Trophy and the T20 World Cup. So we could, and it's never been done before by any country to have held all of those trophies, obviously different trophies for different countries, but we could potentially be in a position in a matter of 12 months where we could have the absolute full suite, and the first step starts here. So I'm backing the boys in to get it. I think Josh Inglis and Travis Head are going to be our men to get it done. They're in absolutely red hot form. And I just can't wait for Sunday night, hopefully seeing us beating up on either our Kiwi or Safa brethren.
Yeah, no, it should be great. And let's not forget we've done this. When I say done this, I mean we've won 1.5 games just about. But at the same time, no Pat Cummins, no Mitch Starc, no Josh Hazlewood. This is no Matt Short coming in tonight, who has actually turned his form right around and has looked unbelievable batting and bowling. I think his bowling is severely underrated too. And I think it's for us to make the semi-finals, considering the sides and our form leading up. I think this is definitely a win for us.
Certainly is, because unlike England, we didn't lose a game. They lost 3. No one lost more games in this tournament than England. That's great to see. Out of 8 teams, they were the only team to lose 3 games. Say what you want about the no results and the abandoned games and all those sorts of things, but that's all I'm going to put out there. The Poms are perennial losers. I love it. Yeah. The last thing, sorry, mate, the last thing I wanted to ask you about before we let you go, you touched on it before at a high level, but India, they were guaranteed before the tournament. We've talked about this a fair bit over the last couple of weeks, and it's still, I know it's grading with you as well. They were guaranteed before the tournament that whatever happened, they would play in Dubai. Not only that, though, they were guaranteed that if they played the semi-finals, that the first semi-final would be in Dubai and they would host that, which meant, as you touched on before, that after the pools were decided and the India-New Zealand game was still to be played, but Group B was decided, South Africa and Australia knew they were progressing. So both of them basically had to fly to Dubai to make sure they were ready to play there should they be playing in that semi-final. Only for South Africa, and it's very rare you'll find me giving sympathy to South Africa. They're not far behind. They're only a good yard behind England in terms of teams that I like to lay into. But you've got to feel for them. They went to Dubai to go back to Lahore. They were already in Pakistan. This is like they're just taking the absolute PISS.
Mate, let's be honest. If that happened in Australia, and let's say Australia played all their games at a bouncy Perth wicket and didn't move out of Western Australia, and New Zealand were also the co-hosts, and India had to travel over. How do you reckon that would go down?
And then they had to travel back to Sydney to play New Zealand. I was like, it wouldn't. They'd threaten to go home. They'd take their ball. They'd take their toys. They'd have a tantrum. It's just... And again, I know that we keep coming back to you can't spell BCCI without ICC or vice versa. But it is just farcical that this is the case. Like, it was one thing when teams had to travel, but we've now had a team having to travel to potentially play someone just to travel back. If South Africa now lose, they've got a case to say to the ICC, well, we probably should have you should be giving us the backdated equal prize money because we may well have won if they, it's just nonsensical cricket organisation, and I get that there's political pieces and everything else sits behind it, but as I said, it's not fair to South Africa, and you can imagine if this is my level of rage right now, if the shoe had been on the other foot, if we had finished on, and again, that was their reward for finishing on top of the pool.
It's absolutely bizarre, and once again, India get away with whatever they want because they are India, and they bring money to this, and they've got so much of a population coming to it, but we can get away with what we want because we're India. But I tell you what, when Travis Head, his innings this morning was pretty special. When just seeing him come out and make a ton, and seeing people in the crowd crying while Travis Head raised the bat and put the helmet on top, mate, that was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it?
Always magnificent to see Trav hitting it around the ground. And for those who are absolutely thinking we lost the plot, we are post-dating this when we're pre-recording this, so having a little bit of fun there. But look, at the end of the day, I think the thing that sums it up is if India don't win this tournament, it's a failure because they've had absolutely everything dealt up. That must sound like a Kiwi then. Absolutely. Getting dealt up for them. Everything in their favour. And again, if India do beat Australia and South Africa beat New Zealand, South Africa have to go back to Dubai. They might get confused and fly to Dubai and then go back to Lahore and not realise what they've done. Like, it's just madness. Like, they're going to have three trips back and forth just to play one game. Like, anyway, it's ridiculous. And to the Indians out there, it is absolutely a miserable failure if you don't win this in dominant fashion, both the semi-final and final, because you've had absolutely everything. You've been absolutely kissed on the balls by the BCCI and ICC to have this your way. So I think we've ranted enough, bros. You need to get out of here, mate. But, bloody India. That's all I can say.
Yep. Well put, mate. I'm not going to add anything to that. We're going to end it right there with bloody India. Well done.
Well, thank you, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. As always, love having you on the show, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good, mate. Thanks for having me.
Well, what an episode it has been. It's been great to have all of our team jumping in. The regular co-hosts that join me so often on the show, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast, Mr. Consistent from Round Ball Australia, Lachlan Avil. Make sure you check out both of their shows. They've got so much more coming to you, especially with an AFL and a football focus. If you want to go more in depth, particularly on those sports, then you can catch Lachie and the boys on Round Ball Australia talking football and then talking AFL. Spider Everett, the great man, alongside Brody Burrows, another great man, on the Third Man Up podcast. We love having them on the show. And of course, it was great to see a double cameo this week from a man behind the ones and the twos, our producer J.R. Carter, coming in and giving his views on the sporting world as well. Make sure to tune in each and every week on our show for your black and white on sport. No grey opinions here. You can catch us on YouTube every week. Make sure to hit the bell so you get the alerts. Subscribe to the channel and like the video. And again, we'd love it if you could follow us on our other social media channels to engage with our other content. You can find us on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, and on TikTok, of course. We'd love to see you over there. Come on over, get involved in the comments on any of our platforms. We love the engagement. And you can catch the episodes on Spotify as well. But until next week for episode 21, we are signing out. Enjoy your sport this weekend. Stay safe if you are in northern New South Wales and southeastern Queensland with Cyclone Alfred on your doorstep. And we hope to be talking all things black and white of sport, no greys, next week.